people say that men are stronger and faster than women, and that's why women shouldn't be in the army. So, for example, the US Army, they used to have different fitness standards for women and men in different tests, but they are now going to switch to a gender-neutral one, which means that men and women are going to be held to the same standard.
Hey everyone, I'm Ikra. This is What in the World from the BBC World Service. Question for the gals out there. Would you sign up to the military? What if you had no choice because of the laws in your country made it compulsory? That wasn't a big announcement, by the way, but some countries like China, Denmark and Chad have laws to enlist young women as well as men. And it got us thinking about the different laws around the world on this. There's such a mix of rules and actual enforcement of them too. Most countries still focus on the men when it comes to conscription. But should we also be talking about the women here? That's what we're chatting about today. Let's get into it. I've got Amelia from the What in the World team right here with me to chat about it. Hey, Amelia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm not bad. Amelia, this is particularly relevant for you because you're from Finland, right?
Yeah.
And Finland has compulsory service, conscription. But what do we mean when we say conscription?
Conscription is when by law you're forced to serve your country. Usually this means in the army, but you can also do national service. And so you'll join the army for a few months to a year and spend time there serving your country. In Finland, we do have conscription, but for all men, so not for women. So both of my brothers have been to the army, my dad's been to the army, my granddad's. I've been to visit them on the bases, and basically every male friend that I have has also served in the Finnish army. And it's kind of a national tradition in a way. People are very proud to go. They see it as a mark of, okay, I'm becoming a man now. They make friends for life there. They learn lots of skills. And so in general, it's seen as a pride thing to go and to serve your country.
And so that's Finland and your experiences there as well. But aside from Finland, what other countries have conscription?
So around the world, around 60 countries have conscription and 20 more have laws that would allow them to implement conscription in their country. During the 90s, we actually saw lots of countries dismantle their conscription service, but that's now changing. And actually, we're seeing more and more countries reintroducing conscription in some way. So the core element of conscription is that you have to go. You can't avoid it. So when I was growing up in Finland, it was very much like, oh, if you don't go, you're going to jail. But I looked this up, and since 2013, apparently you can also do home detention if you refuse. And that's for 173 days. But that's very, very rare. But yeah, you have to go if you're called. Usually you'll get a bit of money, not a salary, but a bit of a stipend. And then obviously you get, your housing and your food situation sorted.
I've got the images in my head here. And, especially from history class, we know historically, when we're talking about conscription, it's always really applied to the men. We picture the men in their uniforms. We are seeing some countries bringing back women as part of conscription, right? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so as of 1st of January 2026, Denmark is conscripting women. And around the world, there's about 15 countries that conscript women in some sort of way. So, for example, we have Denmark, but we also have Sweden and Norway in the Nordics. We have Myanmar, who started conscripting women last year. North Korea conscripts women. But the way they conscript women varies depending on country. So some countries, they conscript all women. For some, it's more of a lottery system. So, for example, with Denmark, they're going to try and fill all the positions with volunteers. But if they don't, they will literally use a lottery system to conscript women. And then it can also be symbolic. So China and the Netherlands could legally conscript women, but they won't. But the law is in place in case they need to use it.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about Denmark then. They've recently changed their rules, right?
Yes. So from the 1st of January, all girls and boys who are turning 18 have to register for a military assessment day. The army is trying to fill all their positions with volunteers. However, if that doesn't happen, basically what happens is it's a lottery system. So you will literally go and get a piece of paper, and then depending on what that number is, you might be forced to go to the army for 11 months.
Just give us a sense of why is this happening then in some countries?
So there's three broad themes for why a country chooses to conscript women as well. So the first one is geopolitical changes, and obviously that's what we're seeing in Europe. Countries are thinking more about their security and safety since the war in Ukraine started. So that's part of the reason why Denmark has chosen to conscript women, because they're not sure if they can defend their country just with the men. Another argument is equality. So that's why Norway, for example, decided to conscript women about 10 years ago, because they felt like in a true equal society, both men and women take part in the army. And then another interesting kind of reason to at least debate conscription is birth rates. So as we know, birth rates are falling all around the world. And this actually leads to a problem for some countries because it means they don't have enough manpower. So, for example, with South Korea, they currently have about 450,000 men serving in the army, and that's a drop of 113,000 from 2019. But actually, experts in the country have said that they need at least 500,000 if they want to have a strong and secure army against North Korea. And in Europe, the same thing is happening. The Latvian defense minister is really pushing for female conscription because he says not enough boys are being born, and so we need to conscript more women. And that's a problem facing all of the Baltic countries, actually.
And I'm just wondering, in those countries where we've more recently seen conscription introduced, how are people reacting? How's this going down with people?
So when you look at the Nordics, it seems that the populations as a whole seem to be relatively accepting of it. I mean, it's happening now. But that's also partly because not all women are conscripted. So it's just a small number of women who do go to the army, and usually they volunteer. But actually, when I looked at Sweden, really interestingly, it seemed that women themselves were quite against female conscription. So in 2025, 71% of 18-year-old women reported that they had a negative view towards conscription, and the equivalent for men was 42%.
As you were saying, the debate has been going on for a really long time. It feels like we're going to be talking about this for a long time to come as well. Just give us a sense of the countries where people are still discussing this.
So most of Europe, to be honest, is having to face this now. And that's partly because of NATO pressures. So NATO is increasing their defense, but countries are thinking, can we actually provide enough manpower? And so I think all European countries are on some level having to discuss this. But yeah, then countries like South Korea, for example, are facing a real decline in number of troops. So they're also going to have to think, what are we going to do now instead?
And we wanted to bring in some of that discussion, of course. We've been speaking to some people across the world for their views on this, so let's have a listen.
For me, it was never that much of a thought of whether or not I would apply for the military service or not. It was quite obvious that I would do that, partly for a feeling of duty and also just because I've always been interested in security policy questions and liked being outdoors, so for me it felt quite natural. Military and civilian service only applies for men in Finland, and I have always found it quite problematic that it only affects half the population, since if there would be a need for defense, everyone would still need to be defending the country. Despite that, I have always had the thought that the choice of conscripts should be done by motivation and competence rather than on gender. So I hope the system would change to that soon.
I feel that you should be a part to security to your country, and mainly on tough times. But also, women have their space in the military. If they feel they can follow that path, they can also doing that role. Because if we see in the history, woman has been very important also inside in the military conscription.
So as we heard there, a lot of different views. I'm keen to know, what are the arguments for and against conscription, though?
So if we start with the arguments for conscription, experts say, if you want true equality, then women and men should both be conscripted. Otherwise, it's not fair. It's also about selecting the best of the best. So you want the top cohort, you want the best soldiers available. But if you're excluding 50% of the population, you just don't have that reach. So it's also about talent and attracting the best talent out there. And then there's also an argument about kind of diversifying skills and leadership. So people in Switzerland voted in November about female conscription. I mean, they rejected it with nearly 85%, so it was clear they didn't want it. But it was pushed for by a woman called Noemi Rotten. And her argument is that women must serve in the military to be granted the qualifications to exercise their true rights as true citizens. She also said that it's unfair that men get to go to the army, they get to form these connections that are really valuable to them, they get all these leadership skills, and women should have the same right to also have that.
So that's the for. What about the against?
Again, there are many arguments against female conscription. So a big one is that we need women to give birth, and actually staying home and being pregnant for 9 months and then popping out a baby is serving your country. It's obviously quite a tough thing to do. And people say women are still at a disadvantage in society. We get paid less. We are more likely to take care of our elderly family members. But then there's also the physicality aspect. So people say that men are stronger and faster than women. And that's why women shouldn't be in the army. So, for example, the US Army, they used to have different fitness standards for women and men in different tests, but they are now going to switch to a gender-neutral one, which means that men and women are going to be held to the same standard.
And of course, there's that idea that only men can fight, which some probably see as outdated.
Definitely. I mean, the world has changed a lot. Women are well educated, they don't give birth as much as they used to, and as we've seen from history, women were in combat roles. So there are lots of reasons for women to take part in the army more now. However, there are still lots of barriers. So, for example, army culture is still very male dominated. And when you look around the world, there are several studies that show women have a harder time in the army than men. So, for example, in Korea, there was a 2022 report which found that women were 4 times more likely to be sexually harassed, nearly twice as likely to be bullied. And just recently in the UK, there was a survey by the Ministry of Defence which showed that 2/3 of women serving full-time have reported experiencing sexualized behavior. So there's a huge culture change that needs to happen if we are going to start conscripting women. And also military outfits are designed for the standard male body, so they don't protect the female body as much, which, holds us back in the battlefield, leads to more injuries, and can lead to, death in the worst cases.
So lots to think about there. Amelia, thank you so much for coming by and explaining all of that, the pros and cons, everything in between. And you also made a film about this, right?
Yes, it's called Why Europe is Asking Women to Get Ready to Fight Russia, and it's also on the World Service YouTube.
So that's on the World Service YouTube alongside a bunch of our videos on the World Service YouTube as well. Remember to like, comment and subscribe to this one as well. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of What in the World from the BBC World Service. I'm Ikra and we'll see you next time. Bye.